The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planted with Sara Pion. I'm Sara Pion, your host, and today we have a very special guest. We have Otha Smith III, CEO of Tetragram. I have to say, before I bring Otha in, that I have been so impressed with this app because my jaded ass has seen a lot of technology in the past 10 years, especially around apps around cannabis journaling and things like that. And this has been the one that caught my eye. So I'm really encouraging you to check it out, but we're going to get more into the details and also some really interesting, wonderful facts about Otha as well. But Otha, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. I always love talking to you, and I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Hey, Sara. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here as well and have this opportunity to talk further with you.
I hope you don't mind that I was like, bye, jaded ass.
Right. I was like, all right, she's keeping it real.
But it's true. I mean, there were a few things that, initially I remember seeing an article about you before we met. And one of the things that really impressed me, not only with the app after we started going through it and talking about it, but the fact that there are a lot of people who come into the cannabis space from other areas. And of course, they bring their skill sets with them, and it's incredibly valuable. But a lot of people really haven't really gone after like a true understanding of the working nature of cannabis and the in-depth things and what you have to do to get there. Because every time somebody asks me, how do I get a job like yours and get the understanding that you have about cannabis, I'm like, well, you leave a really good paying management job and you get behind the bar and you dig in and you learn. And that was something that I had seen that you did. And I really, really respect and admire the fact that you were willing to take that dive too. And before we get into like all of that, I want to hear about your first experience with cannabis.
Oh, that's a great question. Great question. So I grew up in South Anne Arundel County in Maryland, so about 30 minutes south of Washington, D.C. It wasn't until actually years later when I became an adult that I found out that the area that I grew up in, South Anne Arundel County, was very notorious for growing weed. So everybody in my in my area of South Anne Arundel County, it's a very rural area. So I grew up on 3.5 acres of land. My neighbors grew up Dixie Barksdale Farm was behind me. That was 100 acres. So I just say all that to say that cannabis has always been in my life. My neighbor actually dropped out of high school to follow the Grateful Dead. And it was him, I'll never forget, I won't mention his name, but it was him who I had my first cannabis experience with in my father's shed when they were at work. So,
how old were you?
I was 13.
Oh, me too. Yeah. That was my first time too.
Yeah, I'll never forget it. I was 13 and we, this is terrible to say, but we didn't have any bong or anything like that. It was the old aluminum foil days.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, years later, we find out how terrible that is for you. But, that was my first cannabis experience. I didn't know what it was. Of course, he was just like, hey, I got some grass. Do you want to smoke? I was like, yeah, I want to try it. And, he was much older than me. So that was my first experience in my father's shed, my parents' shed. When I was 13 years old. Aluminum foil was the device.
Now, did you feel anything your first time?
I don't, from my recollection, I really didn't. I remember feeling goofy or a little, definitely more relaxed. But it wasn't that moment where I was just like, man, I'm stoned or anything like that. I think I was just really, really goofy and relaxed about it all. I guess maybe I was so worried about the anticipation that it just really didn't impact me the way I guess it did, but I don't really recall feeling stoned or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's a common thing. I know I felt the same way. I actually had my friend go to the person we got it from and try to get our money back because I thought we got ripped off.
Oh, really?
Yeah. what you do?
Yeah, that's hilarious. But I was just like, he was like, you feeling anything? I was like, not really. He was like, just wait. But never really felt anything, but just definitely felt goofy for sure.
I love it. Now, going forward into the future, what made you decide? Well, actually, what were you doing before cannabis? What made you decide to step into it and learn more about it? And then what prompted you to do the app? And I know I just gave you a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. I remember all that, but not. So
I'll prompt you. So, I will.
Yeah, exactly. But no, prior to cannabis, I actually had the most corporate of all corporate jobs. So I've always been in the energy sector prior to cannabis, selling, renewable energy, solar panels, backup power. And so I worked for Constellation Energy, which was owned by Exelon, so the largest utility company in the country. And so at that job, I actually sold electric and gas commodities in deregulated states along the East Coast. Very rewarding, high-paying job. And like you said, I left it all to become a bud tender in order to learn this industry. But that's what I did prior to cannabis. So I was always been a math guy, big into numbers, and so that type of job was right up my alley. But I got into cannabis through an unfortunate event a little over a decade ago, where I was involved in a car accident that changed my life forever. I fell asleep at the wheel, was ejected about 100 feet, and landed on my head, resulting in a TBI.
Wow.
I was actually pronounced dead on the scene. But luckily for me, I had a friend who was in the car. She walked away unscathed, who was going to school at Johns Hopkins to become a doctor, where she is today. So that, in conjunction with my parents always telling me, you got a hard head, I was able to make it out.
Oh, jeez.
But, I've always been a holistic person. I can count on one hand how many times I'd ever used pills. And so, once I got out of the hospital, I was prescribed like all these different opioids, Xanax, Vicodin, Oxycontin, oxycodone, in order to manage my pain and the PTSD I suffered from it. And I was just like, this is not how I want to live my life, like taking pills for the rest of my life. No, thank you. So that's what led me to start diving more so into cannabis, because I've always been a fan of it throughout high school and college. And then once it became legal in my home state of Maryland, they opened up a dispensary 5 minutes from my house. And I'll never forget the first time I walked in there. I was completely blown away. I've never heard of terpenes and cannabinoids. Like, when you buy weed from your legal dealer on the street, he's just like, I got mid-grade and I got high-grade. Like, what do you want? Or I got some Reggie, So it's just not familiar with that type of terminology. So that's when I started to really dive into the industry and then understand the medicinal benefits of these terpenes and cannabinoids. And it's not just all about THC. And that's what gave me the idea to create Tetragram, because I see all these different products and I want to try them all, but there's no way I'm going to keep track of it all. So that was the light bulb effect right there.
Yeah. And before I checked out the app and we spoke, when I'd heard your story, I felt I was very hopeful with the product, because I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come up to me from the tech sector, who didn't have any cannabis experience, but had somebody in their family who worked in the medical field who also didn't have cannabis experience, but together they were going to put together a cannabis app. And, it was always kind of, can I pick your brain? Can I look at it? And I'd be like, well, you can, coffee has a consulting fee. So, people paying to have coffee with me to look at it, and then me feeling bad, like, because it's a horrible app, or, it's just not well thought out. But at the same time, at least feeling happy that my time wasn't wasted, because,
right.
But with you, like, not only do you have the technical knowledge, but you have a deep understanding with how this all works. And so I was really impressed when we did the walkthrough on the app, just how in depth it is for people to be able to track their experiences, track the products, and then also the data component of it, which is really valuable for not only for research, but also for business in particular, for buyers to see what's appealing to their clientele, what they're using it for, the cannabinoids, the terpene profiles, all of that. And I know that I just covered like some brief things on it, but will you kind of explain to our listeners a little bit more about just what a great tool it is for the individual, but also on the back end for the companies that are engaging with your app?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really been our secret sauce is that, like you said, like there's a lot of people who have a tech knowledge and know how to build tech, but they're not cannabis consumers. And like when we saw these other applications that are out there, we were just like, these are people who are fit that mold. They're not cannabis consumers. And so when we built Tetragram, me building it through the eyes of a consumer and definitely medically focused has definitely been something we've been able to champion. But yeah, I mean, it's really about, we built Tetragram with one goal and one goal only in mind, and that is to take the data that we're collecting to not only empower the consumer to understand not just what product, but what terpenes and cannabinoids are working best with their endocannabinoid system. I mean, that's our number one goal. And then on the flip side of that coin, all this aggregate data that we collect anonymously in this crowdsourced way, we utilize to empower the industry. So, when I look at dispensaries, for example, and they have staff that are making product recommendations, but, they're using their own knowledge of what they've used and their own experience to make these recommendations. And if they haven't tried it, they're just throwing darts at the wall. I mean, I was one of them when I worked at the dispensary when I first jumped into this industry. I really didn't know what was going to work. I just read the most information that was available in order to make the best decision. But, with the data that we collect, imagine providing that dispensary with thousands upon thousands of reviews on each product that they sell. And then that review data says, these products are good for X, Y, and Z medical condition or for this level of recreational enjoyment. And then that just changes the conversation by making that dispensary staff agent so much more confident in making a product recommendation because they've seen reviews by thousands of people. When we look at brands or cultivators, for example, this is something we really want to address with our technology because I feel like Tetragram will establish, the first ranking system of cannabis strains and products in the industry. Everyone claims that their product can do this or it can do that, but they really have no data to back up those claims. And so by having cannabis consumers and CBD consumers, log their experiences in a Tetragram and then rate the effectiveness of that experience, we can utilize that information to say, like, wow, if there's, for example, like there might be 5,000 people growing Blue Dream. But we all know that all 5,000 of those Blue Dreams are going to be inherently different. And some of it might not even be Blue Dream at the end of the day. Right. So the ones that are, showing that true benefit, again, from recreational and medical, that's really going to uplift those people who are growing those great strains of those great products. And the ones that aren't, either they step up their game and go back to the drawing board of their genetics, or they just get out of the game altogether, And then lastly, and most importantly, is this type of data that we're collecting is something that doctors, this, have been itching to get their fingers on so that they can educate their patients better and ultimately feel more comfortable about, jumping the line and saying, I support cannabis and these are the reasons why, because we have this data in black and white. And that could also be used from a legislative purpose to help move the needle at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you've made it very, very user-friendly for people. Now, I know that there was, I can't remember, remind me, do you now have QR code capability for downloading the information, or is that something that's coming in the next version?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So that's something that's coming in the next version, not in the current one, but it's really great to see that the industry is starting to pay attention. I mean, COVID pretty much brought back QR codes. I mean, it was a dead technology 5 years ago,
Right,
but,
yeah.
now that, because, 5 years ago, you had to download an app that could read a QR code. Now with phone technology scaling so quickly, that QR code reader is built into your camera. And so, it's just an alignment of the right timing, but I'm glad to see the industry moving forward with QR codes too, because, at the end of the day, that gives Tetragram the ability to import that information a lot more quicker and accurate on the consumer's behalf.
Yeah, and this could, realistically, people could use this as a tool, or professionals could use this as a tool for research protocols.
100%. And so that's one of the things that we don't showcase on our website because we're going through the process of building out version 2, so we're saving some of it. But, I openly talk about, like, we do have a version of Tetragram, a white label version, that we use exclusively for research. Because, again, understanding the impact of cannabis is our ultimate goal. And so we work with universities, independent researchers, and, I am happy to say that now brands and cultivators are starting to say, we can't just make this product. We can't just grow this strain and put it in the marketplace because people love weed. Through people such as yourself, Sarah, you're educating consumers so that they're asking more intelligent questions like, what is this good for? What's in it? And now the manufacturers are having to go back to the drawing board and say, let's do some research on this product before we put it out. And so we can serve that need, which is expanding dramatically. So it's really refreshing to see.
That's awesome. I think it also helps illustrate when I do like trainings for healthcare professionals, one of the biggest questions that I get is, can you give me dosages and ratios for certain needs? And that's when I always look at them, and especially like when I do trainings with pharmacology students, I laugh and I'm like, the human body isn't like that. And it really puts forth it really illustrates how we can have a basic knowledge about how the majority of human beings respond to certain ratios and dosages, and also, just cultivars in general. But we're walking chemistry experiments, so really, like, there can be subtle differences in reactions or extreme differences depending on what's going on with your body chemistry, your neurodiversity, things like that. And the app, I think, capturing the information from people really illustrates that fact and can help educate, healthcare practitioners to really understand that there's that. And I know that as human beings, we always want to have this one-size-fits-all thing with everything because it makes it easier for us to market and manufacture. But that's just not the reality.
Yeah, totally not. We could really go down some rabbit holes with this, but it's like, I wreck my brain every day, like how far do we drive the user experience in Tetragram without making people feel like they're getting lost in the process, right? So, to your point, like when it comes to edibles, for example, or anything, like with cannabis, what did you eat that day before you consume? Because that plays a role in terms of what that effect might be as well. So, we're really only scratching the surface, but I think there's exciting times ahead for sure in terms of further understand how this might work for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you hope to change as far as the perception of cannabis use and products? And we've talked some about that, but are there other things in particular that you're really looking to be impactful around using, with the launch of this app and then the future versions?
Yeah, ultimately, first and foremost, I just want to get people away from thinking about THC.
Right.
THC is always going to be there, regardless if it's 5%, if it's 20, 30%. That's something, that's a cerebral component. So regardless of the amount, you're always going to feel that euphoria. So I really am hopeful, because I'm starting to see it happen already, where people are just paying more attention to the terpenes and cannabinoids as opposed to THC. Make that the last thing you look at. I would hope that eventually we would stop as an industry, sensationalizing these product names. Some of these product names like Chernobyl, for example. Like, I don't want to try that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, or green crack. Like, no, thank you.
I know.
You know?
Well, that was one that we always renamed because it's interesting. Like, people always ask about. Like, I remember somebody coming in many years ago who was a Vietnam vet, and we had Agent Orange on the menu, and oh, did he get mad? And
Really?
yeah, and he was like, "You weren't even alive." I'm like, "Well, I was alive during Vietnam, but I was very little, so I don't recall." But sir, yes, I understand. You know where you're coming from. I mean, it was actually, from my knowledge, it was actually named after the punk band Agent Orange, but still, really unfortunate. And I think, like, I don't think that names are going to go away because there's a rich story that happens behind it, but I think that we're getting more maturity around it, and we are getting more into, like, chemovars.
Yeah. And I mean, and the one thing that, you know, is kind of, that bugs me a little bit is I feel like we've lost, some people in this industry have really lost track of what we got into this industry for, what we legalized this plant for, you know? Like, it's all about the medicinal value of cannabis. And now I just see the industry in certain regards, like, just trying to sell products and get people stoned, which is, you know, not what we started this for, not what a lot of the advocates such as Steve D'Angelo and the list goes on have jumped into this and put their life's work into making sure that people see the medicinal value of it. So I would hope that through the data that we're collecting, we can circle back and and stay focused on the fact that, you know, this is a plant by God that was intended for human consumption in order to improve our quality of life and not just, you know, have a good time.
Yeah, because with the legalization movement, I mean, we all were hoping for, you know, greater safe access to the plant, but you know, it's one of those things that we saw here in California when we got into adult use, and people were like, "Oh, it's party time," and even had, you know, a couple people. I had this one young woman at an event basically introduce me to somebody and basically tell them that I was no longer relevant since we weren't in a medical state anymore. And I was like,
exactly.
I just looked at her and I was like, well, you know, whether we call it medical or adult use or recreational, it's still a substance that creates a reaction in the body, and we still have to have conversations about that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when people say I'm not a medical user, I'm a recreational user, I'm just like, everyone's a patient in my eyes, because, you know, and it's only through conversation. Like, you talk to these people who claim they're recreational only, and you say, all right, cool, so what do you use it for? And they're like, well, you know, it helps me relax, helps me sleep. I'm like, oh, so, you know, there's drugs out there for that too, you know? and then they're like, and then they look at you and like, well, damn, you know, you're right. It's like, exactly. So, and, you know, to your point too, like here in Maryland, where it's medically only, you know, recreation is right around the corner here in Maryland. And, you know, Maryland made it part of their regulatory framework that every dispensary has to have a clinical director on staff. And a lot of these clinical directors are very worried, and they should be, because, you know, dispensary owners don't want to pay that salary just to have someone sit and consult with people. They just want to push product. And so, again, that's why with the data that we're collecting, I hope we can keep our mind focused on the medicinal aspect of it.
Right. Well, and the whole clinical director thing in Maryland is really interesting, because it seems like there needs to be somebody on call at all times. But from what I've heard, not all, some of them don't even know as much as the people that are in the stores. I mean, it's still kind of a continuation. Even like the one thing that I've noticed with education, and this is a point of frustration for me. It's like a colleague of mine was in the Maryland Masters program for cannabis, and I was asking them, you know, how much do you think you're learning? And they were saying, you know, there are some things that I'm getting out of it, but by and large, it's a lot of stuff that I already know. And I was asking about if the instructors were people who were actually like had cannabis knowledge, or are they instructors that have knowledge in other areas and they're given curriculum. And they said that it was a lot of that. It was a lot of, and that's what we're seeing here too. Like, we're seeing I remember when I was doing some work with, teaching in colleges, and there was a lot of pushback from faculty around it. And now that there are more programs that are coming up, the faculty or that are there are teaching those classes. Some of the people who were, not wanting those classes or don't have, deep cannabis experience are teaching it because they're institutionalized as educators. And I think that there has to be a happy medium with that, because otherwise it's just as bad as the certificate programs that people are getting that are basically worthless.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the blind leading the blind sometimes, And, you're exactly right. You find some that know a lot, the majority don't know a lot. And there was a report that came out, a couple of weeks ago that said that, they asked a bunch of patients, not medical patients, just people who, go to the doctor, of course, and they were like, how comfortable do you feel? How confident are you that your doctor knows enough about cannabis to make a recommendation? And I think it was like 40 or 50% said they're not comfortable at all that their doctor can make recommendations. And, again, this all leads back to the lack of research that's been conducted in, recent years. There's no fresh research. So doctors are learning just as much as the patients are, which is, one of the reasons why in version 2 of Tetragram, we're going to create that conduit so that the patient can share their reviews directly with their doctor. So by doing so, we can really empower both through the data that they're sharing back and forth, and both parties can, just learn collectively about what's working and what's not.
I think that's really, really important. That's one thing with, our consultants behind the bar with my company is, I hear people saying all the time, bud tenders are giving medical advice, they shouldn't be doing this, blah, blah, blah. And, I always kind of counter with, my colleagues actually understand that they're not healthcare professionals. They empower people with information. They educate people with information so they can make empowered decisions for themselves, but they also give them the information to take back to their physicians and encourage them to have these conversations. And the physicians that who have attended my trainings that I've worked with in the past have said that, they learn so much from their patients sharing their cannabis experiences. Not only does it help them have a full picture of what's going on with them, and then, if they understand about like the drug interactions too, like the cytochrome P450 reaction, especially with CBD edibles, that, they can better help their patients, but the information that they're getting from them when they start to see patterns and what's helping people actually helps them help other patients as well. And I think that like the work that you're doing with the app kind of helps, it gives it a place to sit where people can actually look at it.
Yeah. I mean, again, our key word is empowerment. Like, we just want to empower everyone who tipped their toe or took the full leap into this industry. And the best way to do that is through data. I mean, this industry has spent so much time focused on growing and dispensaries, this retail advancement that, we've left out some of the pillars of any industry, and one of them is definitely data. I mean, especially in this industry where we're looking to, utilize the product to address medical conditions or just improve people's lives. How can we not pay attention to data? So,
and it's data is such a valuable thing. Like I remember even years ago having like different researchers or different institutions, approaching me about like getting our data and like being like, oh, well, just share your data because we're doing these research things. And I'm like, that costs money.
yeah.
That's not free, and it.
Exactly.
We're excited that you're supporting it and that you're getting into it, but that doesn't mean you get it for free, because that's, you're going to profit off of it. So
Yep.
let's look at that. And that's, I think an amazing way for you to be able to capture the data without having to like talk somebody into giving it up,
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I love about cannabis is that, I think you and I have talked about this, but it's the most communal plant in the world. Like, I mean, until COVID happened, I rarely smoked alone, So,
Oh yeah, we were talking about the puff puff don't pass movement.
right. We started, there's a whole new movement, puff, puff, don't pass, or bring your own player, So,
Right.
BYOC if you want to hang with me. But I mean, you're exactly right. Like, the community of this industry is what's going to help foster the growth of people understanding what's going to work. And they're sharing those experiences with others. Like, it's just contagious with cannabis for people to just want to provide their feedback and their personal experience with a product, because I mean, until federal legalization happens and we can really get some grant money or funding for research, all we have is us, and we need to, share our experiences with others so that, we can we can enlighten each other. This might work for you, man. This is what it did for me. I can't make any promises, but give it a try.
Yeah,
I think that's the only way forward right now.
Oh, it totally is. I like to call that conversation as normalization.
Yeah, ooh, I like that. Hell. I'm feeling that one.
It's my hashtag, and I'll share it with you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Totally. But it's like, whenever, like back when I still worked behind the bar, you'd have people who'd be like, oh, hey, I was having problems sleeping and my friend's been using these chocolate covered blueberries. I think I want to try them. And it's like, that's awesome. That's awesome that you're having that conversation. And people need to have those conversations with people that they trust, where there's no judgment, where they're relating experiences. And then the next step is creating that safe container for experimentation so they can figure out what works well for them. And that's, I think that your app is a great tool to build that container.
Yeah, I mean, even in my household, so, we have a daughter. She's 19 years old. She's during her first year at
Wait a minute, you have a 19-year-old?
Yeah.
Wow, I have to say, you just don't look like you have a 19-year-old.
I know, that's what I was about to say. It fools everyone, Black don't crack over here, So.
As I always say on my side, beige don't age, but quoting Miss Margaret Cho.
But, she knows what her dad does, and I'm very open about it. I've been open about it ever since she was really like 16, 17. And, basically took a page out of my parents' playbook. And when I was coming up, my parents are from, my father's from stateside, but my mother's family is from Barbados. And so, in the Caribbean, like, cannabis is second nature. And so, growing up, my father was like, I'd much rather you smoke than drink. And I said the same thing to my daughter. I was like, I've gotten in more trouble under the influence of alcohol than I've ever gotten under the influence of cannabis. And, she's very straight and narrow, and came home and, told me that she's tried it a couple of times, and, she doesn't see what the big deal was. It's federally illegal. So we had that whole conversation about the racial history of it and so forth. But I guess I just say all that to say you just got to have the conversation and, show that, there isn't the negative stigma exists because of certain political reasons.
Yeah, I think it's really, really wonderful that you had the conversation with her. When I was vice chair of the San Francisco task force, well, and even now on an oversight committee, we have a member of the San Francisco Unified School District on there. And one of the big things that we would talk about was youth access. And, people were really afraid. The thing that always comes up when there's opposition to a cannabis business is, what about the children? And it's like, well, have the conversations. And not only that, but research is showing that as we continue legalization and there isn't as much stigma around it and it isn't as taboo, kids aren't really, Jeff and I, before the pandemic, we went to Hawaii, and we'd had a couple people that were like our age or older that, we had interacted with, and we had gifted them some cannabis, and they're like, oh, hey, thanks, that's awesome. But younger people, And of course, these were people who were old enough to use cannabis legally, just so you all know out there, but still young. But they were all kind of like,
throw that out there.
yeah, they're like, nah, I don't do that. My uncle likes it. But it's like it's actually gone the opposite way, where it's not even as cool for youth because there is no taboo. Because I don't know about you, but I was a very precocious kid. So anything that somebody told me I wasn't supposed to do, I was like, ooh.
Exactly. I mean, same here because, curiosity kills the cat, right? And it's like,
For real.
anytime you tell, yeah, exactly. Anytime you tell someone don't do something, they're going to be like, well, why shouldn't I do it? Let me try it out and figure out why. My father, he's from the East Coast, but as soon as he graduated high school, he moved to San Francisco with Haight-Ashbury. So, and given his era, that was right during the hippie movement. And so, my sister and I growing up, he had very colorful conversations with us and told us about, him doing acid, him doing cocaine, him doing mushrooms, everything. And so that really took a lot of the curiosity out of my sister and I. So we really didn't, he was like, the only thing if you're going to do anything, just stick to cannabis. And here we are.
That's it. That's the bottom line. You want to, like, when people are like, what about the children and wanting to keep everything from them? That's the one thing that I don't think a lot of people are thinking of. When you remove the mystique, it no longer is attractive.
Yep, exactly. So, only with time.
And nobody's trying to get your kids high at Halloween by putting edibles in their thing. Nobody is going to give away what they've had to spend so much money on. That's not happening.
No, definitely not. You got a point there. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm not wasting mine. This stuff is, and you bring up a great point. Like, cannabis is not cheap. Not cheap by any means. So, there's a lot to be said about that.
What are the prices like in Maryland?
So it ranges. I think on the low end, like if you were to buy like a quarter, not a quarter, everything's more so eighths. So if you buy an eighth, you're looking at on the low end $30 if you can find some good specials. I'd say the average price for an eighth is probably $50.
Okay, so you're comparable to what we're seeing here in California too.
Yeah. I've been out to California many times, and it's interesting though because the taxes vary. And I remember, picking up a jar and it was like $50, and by the time the taxes got included, I was like at $70. I was like, damn.
Yeah.
Not coming to this county anymore.
No, and that's one of the biggest disconnects, I think, from like a policy standpoint. California had really high hopes of getting all these taxes, and that was how they got people to pass legalization. But what they weren't understanding was that all that taxation was going to drive people back to their traditional market. So if they had kept the taxation low, they would be making more money in taxes than they are now because more people would be purchasing it from, the regulated market.
Exactly. Exactly. And, when people talk about like the East Coast versus the West Coast, I always say, well, you got to look at it. They're two different markets in the sense that, California has always been the largest exporter in the country, whereas, like, you look at everyone's very warm and fuzzy about New York and New Jersey, but those two markets have always been the biggest importer of cannabis. So you really can't compare the two when you think about the history of cannabis in those markets, for sure.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm just so glad that New York is coming on board because, it's my husband, Jeff, he played with the Grateful Dead guys and Further, and so like they would go into New York, and New York loves the Dead, so like Empire State Building would all be in like tie-dye colors. There's a lot of East Coast Deadheads, and if you're listening, hi out there, sending you love. But he remarked on one of the things that made him really sad was people getting busted for weed waiting in line to go into the shows. And
Yep.
And now when we're looking at, legalization there and also the stuff in New Jersey, the fact that they're prohibiting people from growing their own really disturbs me.
Oh, yeah, 100%. you know what it's all about. It's all about big business and making sure that if you buy anything, it comes through, that framework. But I mean, it's just a legal right of anyone to be able to grow cannabis. I feel like they can grow tomatoes. So it's really unfortunate, and I think Maryland's headed in that same direction where they're not going to allow home grow. Still trying to remain optimistic, but it's not looking good.
See, and that's ridiculous because if there are businesses that are lobbying against it because they think it's going to take away from their business, it isn't. It isn't.
No.
It isn't. It isn't. Like people who grow for themselves, usually, a lot of people do it for the joy of it, and there are people who just cannot, who need more than they can afford to purchase, or they want to be able to know that, the control. They want to have the controls from seed to flower as to how it's been taken care of. But by and large, most of us either don't have green thumbs or we're far too lazy to grow our own.
Exactly. Like me, I don't have a green thumb. Like I'll kill anything. So it's just the fact of life. But 100%, like it's not going to be disruptive of anything. There will be certain people who want to grow, and like I was talking to a gentleman yesterday, and the main reason he grows is because he doesn't trust the products that are coming out of the dispensary. Like, are they really being tested the way they should? Or what chemicals are being used to spray it? Like I said about the testing facilities, like that's definitely an oversight in the regulatory framework of every state where they've made these testing facilities the police of the industry, but they're privately held, and so that just doesn't work. It's kind of like privatization of jails. That's a disaster. I mean, it's never in anyone's best benefit to do something like that when it comes to regulatory standards. So,
right.
I totally get the home grow. It makes complete sense to me.
Well, and testing has been problematic because you can you can bring it to one lab and bring it to another, and you might get different things because where's the calibration in the testing?
Yep.
That's been a big disconnect. And I mean, I don't blame. I think it should be somebody's right to be able to control what they're consuming. I don't. It's not, and not only that, but it actually creates another opportunity for business. So then you have a really rich greenhouse, business as well, where you can sell clones, you can sell seeds, you can sell, other products for growing, like different equipment. It actually ends up economically opening up a whole other area of entrepreneurship for people too. And there's not going to be anything bad that comes out of that. We need to.
Yeah, I mean,
what were you going to say?
It just spurs innovation by having home grow, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And then there are opportunities for, education and classes and who knows, maybe even services for people to like come and teach somebody at home or tend it for them. I mean, there's so much there. And I just don't, it's a really interesting thing to see people coming into this sphere that don't understand the culture of cannabis and how it's helping people, and they're putting money into creating laws that is just, I mean, we're going from, we wanted legalization so that nobody would be getting fined or going to jail for consuming or creating or just being savvy entrepreneurs, but we've legalized it so that the entry is so high. And we're perpetuating the cycle that was happening before. We're still going to be incarcerating people and fining people and putting people, endangering people. And that's not why we did this.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. It's, the barrier to entry is so high. I mean, in order to open up a dispensary, you got to have a minimum of like $1 million liquid. Like, who has that? If you want to open up a grow, you got to have a minimum of like $3 to $5 million liquid. Again, who has that underneath the mattress? And so, you have people who have been really great in the legacy market as growers and so forth, but they don't have an opportunity or a shot to cross over into the legal market just because the framework is unrealistic for them to participate in it, which leads to further incarceration and subject to fines or jail time, everything else. So we got a lot of work to do. One of the things I did see that was refreshing is that, like, New Jersey, for example, in their regulatory framework that they're establishing is, they have micro licenses so that, you can get in with not only, but, a lot less capital, and then have the ability to scale up over time. So, we just need to make it equal so that everyone can, enjoy this process of what we're going through.
Yeah, I agree. When we were first proposing equity programs in California, one of the things that I had brought up when we were in task force was, well, if somebody gets busted for having an unregulated business, how about instead of prosecuting and fining, we actually give them something to here's a pamphlet on the different organizations that you can get in contact with to actually bring your business up to speed. And, when we looked at, and one of the biggest things that got me with equity too is that we had all these guidelines for people to be able to qualify as equity, but there were big loopholes that were making it so that we weren't necessarily serving the people that we set out to help. And that was, one of the big things. And it's like the stuff that nobody wants to talk about is that, in the beginning, it was like, well, we can't say Black and brown communities. We have to say communities impacted by the war on drugs. I'm like, okay, so that lets a lot of other people in who already were privileged enough to make that happen. And that's not cool. And the fact that in California, we've had some really predatory practices around equity programs where equity operators have had partnerships with other companies where they slowly get eked out, they get ripped off, or they can't make decisions. So they're not empowered. It's not their business.
Yep. I 100% agree. It's like I used to say all the time, I still do, is that, like Black and brown people, we were what is now called the MSOs. We were just given a different term. We were given the term kingpin,
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. And as you see, a majority in every state that has legalized cannabis for medical or recreational and claims to have some type of equity program, it hasn't really succeeded. And there's been lawsuits after lawsuits about the problem. And we really, for me, of course, it pulls on my heartstrings because I'm a minority in this industry. One of the 2-3%, which is this. That's a problem in itself, just making that statement. So we got a lot more to do. A lot more to do.
We do have a lot more to do, but fortunately, as it starts to normalize, there are more organizations that their mission statement is to help the populations that actually need the leg up, and they're feeling freer to come in and do work. Like with our, there were some attorney practices that were helping, equity program participants, but they were receiving grants for it, and they weren't necessarily nonprofits. They were for-profit companies that were doing this work. But now there are nonprofits that have been nonprofits for years that are finally feeling more comfortable to do it. Like before I worked in cannabis, I worked in civil rights. I worked for a lawyers committee for civil rights of the San Francisco Bay Area, which was founded by RFK. And of course, when I was working there, we weren't talking about weed at work. We were talking about, we had this program, and it still exists there, called Legal Services for Entrepreneurs. And we have attorneys from all the big firms, small firms, big firms, you name it. They all have membership at Lawyers Committee. And so our LSE program used pro bono attorneys to help entrepreneurs start their businesses. And there's a lot of really cool stuff that came out of that.
I can imagine. That's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know you did that.
Yeah.
You're like an onion. Every time I talk to you, it's like peeling another layer, man.
Oh, I've done a lot of stuff. Some stuff has been like, some stuff's cool. Some stuff's like just kind of like, oh wow, that's way out of left field. But it's all I've learned so much from every experience, and this was it was one of the best experiences. I still I still keep in touch with my colleagues. I really love them a lot. And sometimes when I talk about LCCR, I still say we, even though I haven't been there in like 10 years. But I did reach out to them this year because Success Centers has been doing some really great work with equity applicants. And I connected them because I thought, hey, now that we're into legalization, will legal services for entrepreneurs have resources for people, in equity programs? And they were thrilled because they had attorneys in the pro bono program that were approaching them saying, hey, I've started doing stuff with cannabis law. Do you have any candidates in your program that might need help with that? And they hadn't even started the outreach yet. So it was kind of a nice... It dovetailed so well, and it makes sense because not only are these grants going to be, if this works out, if they're able to do work with it, the grants will not only help the equity programs, but it's actually going to help an organization that its foundation is supporting these very same people. And so it's not going into the pockets of people who aren't engaged in civil rights and social justice or going to other projects that aren't associated with this. It's a renewable, it's cyclical, it's sustainable, it's supporting something that we should. I mean, the one thing that got me, and I'm sorry, I'm just running off a little bit, but like when I was working in civil rights, that was when Obama was elected. And that day, like the boss said, everybody gets to stay home and watch him get, when he gets sworn in and everything. So we're all home on the phones with one another crying, and it was really wonderful. But then when we got back to work, our funding started to dry up because people were like, oh, we've got a black president now. We don't have any civil rights issues. And we were like, No,
this is now we have somebody who can help move this effort a lot more forward, and be passionate about it because he's been there on the front line,
That's it.
That's wow. That's an interesting story, but that unfortunately it doesn't surprise me that funding started to dry up because everyone's like, hey, everyone's treated equally now. We just had it's like a check on the box when Obama got hired, got elected. So. Yeah, I mean, there's so much more to go. I mean, when people just look at the timeline of, when segregation ended, I mean, we're talking way less than 100 years. I mean, we got so much more to go, given, 400 plus years of people being, just completely marginalized. So, that's one of the things that was great that I saw when we were when I was at MJ BizCon. It's like I've gone the last 4 or 5 years, with that hiccup there because of COVID. And, each year it's just getting more and more diverse. I see more people that, look like me. I see more women showing up. So I think, the future is very bright. We just got to again, understand what we got in this for and understand that certain aspects of this industry need to be addressed more so than others,
Yeah. It also makes my heart really happy to see more people who look like me in the industry too. And you're right. We got a lot of work left. There's a lot to go. But I mean, hey, that means we'll always have jobs.
So we all got jobs. We all have a purpose here, and this is going to be a long ride.
That's it. That's it. And looking at that, like, what are you excited about in the future? What do you think is going to happen? What do you hope to see?
Well, I'm still very optimistic about federal legalization, but with that being said, I do expect it to be at least 4 to 8 more years before that happens. I would like to see, I'm very optimistic that, some of these research opportunities with universities and independent researchers start to get funded. I mean, I still get excited every time we have a conversation with a researcher or a university, but I do know in the back of my head that the chances of them getting funded are very slim, and it's going to be very tough to do so. I think, that will be opening up as time goes on. So I'm really excited about the research side of it. And one of the things one of the things that's really key to my heart is just seeing a standardization when it comes to not only testing of cannabis products, but the labels. Like, sometimes I really get incensed, and maybe I get carried away, but I just hate how I travel throughout the country. And, I'm lucky, I'm spoiled by being here in Maryland, where every product has a label that tells me exactly what terpenes and cannabinoids in it. If I go to PA, same thing there. But once I get out of PA and I go to, Massachusetts, New Jersey, or whatever, I no longer have access to that information. And I just think it's ridiculous that, cannabis being something just like any other product that people consume, we can easily get access to the ingredients of what's in that loaf of bread or what's in that water, what's in that drink. But when it comes to cannabis, why don't we have that same access to that information? And so I think I'm very hopeful, and I see the tide turning slowly, very slow, but we definitely need to have a standard approach so that we know that every product that we buy, we can see what those ingredients are. Because when I travel to, like California, there's no terpenes and cannabinoids for the most part on the label, so I don't know how to shop or what I want,
Right, yeah. It's few and far between. I'm really hoping that we catch up on that.
Yeah, so I talk to endless doctors every day, and they travel across the country too, and they're just like, "Oh, I don't know what to buy," because I didn't even. The only thing I got was the THC amount, and that's subpar. That's really subpar. We're doing the consumer a real injustice by not providing the full story of that product to their fingertips.
Yeah. Yeah, you're so right about that. And for our listeners, if they want to follow you on social media or check out the app or contact you, how can they do that?
Great. The best way to contact me is through Instagram. So you can find us at the Tetragram app on Instagram. The same with Facebook at the Tetragram app. And for Twitter, it's at Tetragram, just because you know how this industry is, and so we had our Twitter account shut down, so we had to start a new one. Which is, I'm a software company. Like, give me a break here, but that's the best way to reach me. And then, of course, on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Like, I keep that window open every day. So, Otha Smith, OTHA. Smith is how you can find me on LinkedIn. So please reach out. I encourage people to give us all the feedback related to our platform so that we can build the best thing for the people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those of you out there listening, remember, Planted is twice a month. And we are on Instagram. We are Planted with Sara. We are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook. We are Planted with Sara on Twitter. Our website is www.plantedwithsara.com. And of course, you can find us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network. You can listen to the podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. So we are on Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, Listen In, Pandora, you name it. We're there. And if you want to share a good thing, remember, our podcast is word of mouth. So share your favorite episodes with your friends. Write a review for us so that I know that you're listening. And if you're liking it, let me know. And if you want to hear other people or there are other things that you want to hear on the podcast, I'd love to hear that too, because I'm doing this for you. And Otha, thank you so much for being with me today. I always have fun talking to you, and I'm just really excited to be able to share your brilliance and your app with the world, and I'm looking forward to even more great, deep, nerdy conversations with you in the future.
Oh, likewise, Sara. The pleasure is all mine. I really cherish our relationship, our friendship, and thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today and speak to your listeners. So let's have a great weekend and continue to push on.
Oh, thank you. You too. And for all of you out there, until we meet again, remember, it's a crazy world out there. Be kind to one another. Stay safe. And until we meet again, stay curious. Take care, everybody.